Game remasters are commonplace nowadays, and some of the ones that are chosen come right out of left field. When Square Enix decided to do that for Final Fantasy VIII, it was a little surprising, but not nearly as much as what we're talking about today from the Chrono series. Here is my review of Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers Edition for the Nintendo Switch. The plot here is a little complicated. It is a bit of a sequel to Chrono Trigger, but very separated. You play as a boy named Serge. When visiting with a friend at the nearby beach, you fall into a rift, finding yourself in an alternate reality where you apparently died a decade before. You then start an adventure of being chased down by a catman named Lynx with the fate of all realities in the balance. Now, I find the plot here to be pretty decent in that PS1 Final Fantasy style of party members, side plots, and you just exploring the world with the kind of crazy reality bending stuff you'd expect from a Chrono game. But the big question is whether you need to play Trigger first, and the answer is no. While Cross has a lot of ties and ends up dealing with the repercussions of the events of that first game, most of it is pretty separated. It's only when you start to deep dive into the background lore that things get wacky with how Trigger led to the events of Cross. Now, as a side note, this remaster also comes with the plot-based game Radical Dreamers. The original project of a Trigger follow-up, this non-canon tale is about Serge, Kid, and a familiar face trying to tie up loose ends from the original game. When it comes to gameplay, this is a JRPG with turn-based combat and a lot of character recruitment. As you play through the game, you'll explore an overworld full of towns and dungeons, fighting off enemies and bosses in turn-based combat. Now first, this is a remaster of the PS1 Chrono Cross. The Radical Dreamers Edition has new additions. As I mentioned earlier, this game is bundled with the original Radical Dreamers entry for its first official English translation. The visuals have been smoothed out and redone, giving the very jaggy character renders a good and smooth look, along with the backgrounds being much better as well. To keep going, the game includes a few different resolution options. You've got the standard 4:3 window with borders on all sides, much like the Switch port of Final Fantasy VII. There's also a more full screen view, though it isn't completely full screen. It'll still have borders on all sides, but much more full screen than by default. We also have cheat codes that we can toggle. You have slow and fast options to adjust the speed of the game, a battle cheat to enable elements to always be at their max level and your characters will never be hit by incoming attacks, a random encounter toggle to make sure you only fight required battles, and finally an auto battle cheat to have your party members constantly using physical attacks without command. The cheat codes can definitely make things easier for you. Outside of the battle toggle being God mode, the faster speed and auto battle can be used for easy grinding for levels and materials. Or you can combine them with the battle God mode toggle if you're just interested in the plot or have played the game before and want to get through the more annoying battles without difficulty. But let's get into how the game is played. Chrono Cross is like other Square RPGs of the age. The plot drives you forward to different towns and dungeons. You have an overworld to get from point A to point B, and each town has shops, facilities, and side missions you can become involved in. Though we do have the addition of dimension hopping to mix things up. You can freely hop between the realities to resolve a plot thread. You need a Hydra, but they're extinct in this reality, so hop into the other where it isn't extinct and you can keep going. Now dungeons have turn-based combat and like Trigger, the enemy encounters wander on the map and must be walked into to initiate the battle. You're then taken to an arena to fight them, and that brings us to the very different combat mechanic. When your turn comes up, you have an option between physical attacks and using an element. Elements are special abilities that are equipped to your character, mostly in the form of a magical spell. Think of it like the materia from Final Fantasy VII, but more in depth. Elements can be equipped to different combat levels, and depending on what the default level of the element is, the power can change. Putting a level 1 into a level 4 slot, for example, will give you a +3 to that element's base power and effect. Each character also has an innate element that produces a Pokemon-like stab effect with elemental weaknesses. Having Irene use a blue element ability will produce more damage than the green innate Razli. But using elements goes a bit further. The game doesn't feature a magic point or MP system. When you start a battle, everyone begins at element level 0. As you rack up physical attack combos, that will increase and open up the ability to use your element. Combat is a mix of the combos and doing the right element at the right moment with others, especially considering each element can only be cast one time per battle. Battle conclusion is also different. You kind of gain experience, but there are no visible levels. As you fight, you'll eventually get spoils in the form of stat ups. Not necessarily you've reached level 10, but getting a +5 to health and the like. But getting away from the combat, the beauty of Chrono Cross is the massive roster of recruitable characters. While some must be chosen over others, depending on what the plot requires of you, there are a total of 45 playable characters you can recruit for your 3-member party. A lot of these characters are required, but just as many are optional and missable if you're not careful. Some players are a bit intimidated by the huge roster, but it helps when you want to replay it, picking a different party than the last time, especially considering different party members will comment on main plot threads in different ways. Now, as all of this comes together, we get a good amount of content and length. If you play the game vanilla without any of the cheat codes, Chrono Cross will easily take you 40 to 50 hours all the way through. But if you opt for cheating to get out of grinding or doing attack combos, you can easily have that to 20 to 25, which is still a pretty good amount of time. And now, presentation, the mind-boggling part of this remaster. Visually, the game looks pretty good. The redone visuals are very pretty and look great, especially if you go into settings and re-enable the original graphics, seeing just how bad it looked back in the day. Though it is worth noting that they did not redo any of the FMV CG cutscenes. Those are still in the old resolution and look very pixelated and rough. But performance. Chrono Cross has a lot of frame drops and they are everywhere. Walking around town, battle animations, cutscenes. They aren't small either. 20s, 10s, and even single digits on a pretty regular basis. It doesn't ruin or break the combat with it being turn-based, but it's very jarring. But the weirdest thing is, it isn't a Switch problem. Even the PS4 and PS5 versions of this remaster struggle to reach even 30 FPS. Some people believe the performance was done on purpose, but whether it was or not, the flow is rough. That's all I've got for performance, so let's go into battery life. Chrono Cross gives the original model a range of 4 hours and 13 up to 4 hours and 58. The Nintendo Switch Lite gets a range of 4 hours and 28 up to 5 hours and 39. The Redboxer V2 2019 model gets a range of 8 hours and 22 up to 9 hours and 21. And the OLED model gets a range of 8 hours and 45 up to 9 hours and 57. In conclusion, Chrono Cross is a very unique Square RPG that's been officially remastered and available to handheld players. Now on the downside, the FMV visuals and a load of performance issues make this a pretty but difficult game to trek through. But if you love the game or the franchise, it can still be a lot of fun to make a party out of wacky characters like Razly or Starkey. Just know that you're in for a rough ride with performance regardless of the platform. Reviews to go rates Chrono Cross the Radical Dreamers Edition for the Nintendo Switch a 6 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.